Even though there isn't any progress on the Damian Lillard trade, at least not publicly, it doesn't mean that the Miami Heat can just stand still. Who starts at power forward? Can Tyler Hero rejoin the team? And who else gets added to the roster? We open up the mailbag to answer 5 burning questions on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg. Here, as always, David Ramil. However, you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, your favorite podcast app. Thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. We said yesterday that we're going to rank the biggest sports stars in South Florida on today's show, but we're going to actually hold that. We're going to save it for Friday. Instead,
Psych.
Today, psych/tease, right? Instead, we're going to do 5 burning questions today, asking and answering the biggest non-Damian Lillard questions still facing the Heat, including if Tyler Hero could be happy here if a Lillard deal doesn't happen. But let's start with one that probably doesn't even rely on a Dame deal getting done, and that's who starts at power forward. Quick recap here. Kevin Love basically ended the season as the Heat starting power forward. He was, for the most part, the Heat starting power forward after he signed here off of a buyout, even though Caleb Martin kind of shuffled in and out depending on playoff matchups. And then the Heat re-signed Kevin Love to a 2-year deal. The Heat have Kevin Love, obviously. They still have Caleb Martin. They still have Haywood Highsmith, whose deal was guaranteed. Nikola Jovic is coming back. They drafted Jaime Jaquez Jr. in the first round, who may or may not be able to. And then there's a few other options also at power forward potentially. But I think Kevin Love has the inside track on this one. Would you agree?
No, I actually think Christian Wood will be the starter at power forward.
Oh, wow. Curveball right off the bat. I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
I think that's kind of cheating because I know one of the upcoming questions is about the roster improvements, but I think Christian Wood will be the opening day starter. Maybe it's a little crazy to think that Miami can help him salvage his career, but given that they've done that so extremely well over Pat Riley's tenure here in South Florida, I have to say that I think they will get him to focus. Reports coming in earlier today that Christian is clearly on Miami's radar, and with good reason. The talent, I think, is not necessarily undeniable. It's absolutely there. It's just a matter of him getting to buy in to what Miami is looking to do, which is win. And the addition of Wood, I think, hinges on their ability to trade for Damian Lillard, so that might take some time. But I still think that it's not like there's a long list of suitors that Miami has to fight off for, but he's got the height, he's got the talent, he's got the ability to space the floor, he can put the ball down. He's not the most skilled when it comes to, creating his own shot opportunities, but he certainly can do a better job than any other option on Miami's roster right now. So I think in terms of complementing what Bam Adebayo can do, I think it's Wood.
The Heat have shown interest in Christian Wood in the past, not even just the past this offseason, but even dating back to the last couple of seasons. Right. It's a guy that I think intrigues them from a skill set perspective, and he's intriguing from a skill set perspective for a lot of teams. That's kind of why he keeps bouncing around, because then once you get him and you realize, all right, this guy doesn't really care about defense a whole lot, and he's pretty tunnel visioned. He does not pass the ball, like, ever. Yeah. So those are some things that, like you said, in Miami, if anybody were to kind of coax the best version of himself, it would be the Miami Heat. I love the curveball that you sent here. I would love for the Heat to go ahead and get Christian Wood. I think it's, especially if you did end up making a Damian Lillard deal, if you've got sort of like this mature 33-year-old Damian Lillard, obviously Jimmy Butler and his leadership, Bam Adebayo knowing exactly what to do, always making the right play every single possession, and then let's say it's Josh Richardson starting at shooting guard, who's solid, right? So not going to make a ton of mistakes, not going to really do anything that takes you out of a basketball game. That's kind of what Christian Wood does. But if he's the only guy and he's bracketed by all those other guys, I feel like he could be the best version of himself. And maybe he's able to you're able to strip away those not great parts of his game. And then he's just a great rebounder, guy who could space the floor, shoot threes, and maybe even be your sixth man, so to speak. Like, if you could start him at power forward, you know what I mean? But then you can anchor and lead some bench units the way that Dallas experimented with doing with him last year. So I love the Christian Wood thing. If it's not Christian Wood, because he is still a free agent, the Heat are interested in adding him. It seems like they're just waiting on this Damian Lillard thing to get done before they start filling out the roster. Like you said, we'll get to that later. But if not Christian Wood, I think it is Kevin Love. It just makes the most sense. Size, rebounding, veteran presence, and more importantly, the 3-point shooting, right? That's kind of what they look for.
He struggled at times when he was appointed the starter, and his on-off numbers weren't exactly scintillating there. But I think in terms of what he provides, at least in theory and in reality, just the good vibes in general, and that's something that's important. He's not looking to take his own shot. He's going to be able to provide, again, theoretically, but still the ability to space the floor. He gets his rebounds. He makes that smart look-ahead pass. Those things matter to teammates. You want to play with a guy like Kevin Love, who's not looking to just greedily take his shot or anything like that. He's a much more complimentary player at this role in his career, and he compliments guys, especially if they're able to add Damian Lillard. It makes so much of a difference.
Yeah.
They'll have the ball in their hands, but it's always nice to have that one extra outlet player in Kevin Love.
Yeah, I mean, it's not ideal. Like, you kind of laid out the reasons why. He's at a different stage of his career now, but he might just be the best option if the Heat don't make some other move to acquire a power forward. Like, they don't want to put Caleb Martin or Haywood Highsmith there. They would rather have them coming off the bench, playing more of a perimeter position. Jaquez, I don't think, is the guy that they want to put there as a rookie.
Not ready.
And I don't think they look at him as a 4 anyway. I think they look at him more as a 3. Jovic is the interesting one. Going into his second season, if a Damian Lillard doesn't get done, or if he's not even included in a Damian Lillard trade, I don't know that he's ready. I think he's still a little too raw. He basically didn't play his rookie year. He looked great in summer league for the most part, but he's still trying to. He still need, like, in summer league, he was the guy, right? Like, he had the ball in his hands. He was bringing the ball up. They were running offense for him. I don't know that he would I don't know that he would have a play ran for him at the NBA level if he was sharing the court with those 4 other starters that we're talking about, especially if, it's Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. Just start there, right? Like, why would you run a play for Nikola Jovic? And that's no offense to Jovic, right? Like, that's just because you have Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo on the floor, which you don't obviously have that in summer league. So I don't know. I don't know that he is that complimentary, can fit in a complimentary way, I should say, the way that Kevin Love can. Yeah. But what do you think about Jovic going into his second year, starting there?
I love the idea in theory. He's just not ready yet. He's still too young. He's a year away, I think, from getting that kind of serious consideration, as much as I'd like to give it to him. And it's not just the defensive issues, which I think are the biggest problem in terms of him being able to carve out steady minutes, is that he's going to be carved up defensively because he's just not switchable, and he's not strong enough to get with the bigger, more experienced players. And then he's not quick enough to move with the smaller ones either. So that's a problem. But also, it's the fact that he does not have a consistent 3-point shot. As much as I'd love to see that he's made improvements, and as much as he told me he's made improvements working with Rob Porter, I don't see it consistently enough for him to be out there as a good 3-point threat. And if he's not getting that kind of respect from other players, then he's just a negative out there.
I think he's going to get a bunch of minutes if this is the group we're looking at, right? If there's no Christian Wood, if this is the group, I think he'll get minutes, especially early in the season. They're going to see what he can do off the bench. I don't think he's a starter yet at this point in his career. I love everything that he's doing. I love his upside. He's young. He just graduated high school. He's not ready to be a starter with this group.
Him or Haywood gets more minutes next year.
I don't know.
Fair enough.
I don't know. Can I throw one more option at you?
Yes.
Bam Adebayo. If you start Thomas Bryant or Orlando Robinson at center and have Bam Adebayo at the 4, and of course it's kind of, I was actually going to say it's interchangeable. It's not. If it's Thomas Bryant and Orlando Robinson, interchangeable is sort of Kevin Love and Bam Adebayo. They're a little bit more interchangeable. Bryant and Orlando Robinson look great in summer league, and I'm kind of a believer in Orlando Robinson. I think the Heat are believers in Orlando Robinson. That's why they promoted him off that 2-way to the standard roster before summer league even happened, and then he had that impressive summer league. So they believe in him, and I think they're interested in Thomas Bryant's skill set. More importantly, Thomas Bryant is a 36% career 3-point shooter. Orlando Robinson shot almost 40% from 3 in summer league, and he says that that's real, and it looks pretty good. Any chance that that's your starting front court?
Yeah, I've said it before. I think that's what they're leaning towards when they bring in guys like Love, Bryant, and Orlando Robinson, and his focus on 3-point shooting in summer league. It was so apparent.
you kind of lump those three together, Love, Bryant, and Orlando Robinson. Do you view those three as playing the same position? Because I look at Kevin Love more as like sort of that Myers-Leonard power forward type, where I think of Thomas Bryant and Orlando Robinson strictly as centers.
Yeah, but playing Myers-Leonard-ish as well, Kelly Olynyk-ish, guys that space the floor aren't legitimate threats. I mean, Orlando a little bit more so in terms of his back to the basket game, the more traditional center, but not really. Like, that's not his strength.
No.
And Thomas Bryant certainly doesn't have that either. Although there's always the potential that they could develop these things. Both of them are still young enough. Right now, they're more finesse type centers.
But I think about like defensively. Like, those guys aren't chasing fours around ever. Like, you can hide Kevin Love a little bit on like a non-threatening four, the way that you could like a Kelly Olynyk, for instance, and have Bam Adebayo guard. But if Bam and Thomas Bryant or Bam and Orlando Robinson are on the court, Bryant and Robinson are getting the other center
in drop
every single time. Yeah, probably in drop coverage, but they're getting that assignment every single time defensively, whereas Kevin Love and Bam are just a little bit interchangeable. But I mean, I guess we're kind of going down a rabbit hole. It's not all that important because either way, Bam would be starting alongside one of them in this hypothetical.
Fair enough. All right, we can always move on here. And
well, wait. Do you think that Bryant and Orlando Robinson are options there?
Yes, I think Orlando more than Thomas Bryant. I think they brought him in to be a good backup center, basically in exchange for Cody Zeller, who kind of outlived his playing time here. With Orlando, the difference, what I see from him is, one, he's young. He's got the upside. As you mentioned, he's already on a good contract, and there's a little bit more experience with his game. He has to come in here and be the anti-Omer Yurtseven, and the fact that he has to come into camp and the weeks leading up to camp and be an absolute beast. He has to show that he wants this, not just given the opportunity the way Karad gave it to him in Las Vegas against inferior levels of competition. If he can be a dog, if he can be the kind of guy that gets in your face and is vocal and barks, and I don't think he can, but if he can show that aspect, or at least the potential for that, then he's the player who can earn those kinds of minutes as a starter. I'm just not sure that I see it yet.
I'm not going to rule anything out, obviously, with this group and with Eric Spoelstra. I would be very, very surprised if Thomas Bryant or Orlando Robinson were starting in the front court. I would be very, very surprised by that for all the things that you already laid out. How do the Heat fill out the rest of the roster, and will Kyle Lowry even be on the team next year? We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting on Major League Baseball over at FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll get $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run. Also on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. Who doesn't love that? There's no better place to bet on Major League Baseball than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. It's that easy. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Tomorrow, this time for real, we're going to be talking about the biggest sports stars in Miami. I have a feeling we're going to disagree quite a bit on that one. So make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. Second burning question. He's on fire! How do the Heat fill out the rest of the roster? Because there's 13 guys under contract now. They're obviously waiting on this Damian Lillard situation to be resolved. Christian Wood is still out there. But for whatever reason, the Heat have not decided that they want to go in that direction. Maybe Christian Wood is waiting on it. Whatever. They have 13 guys under contract. There's a couple of variables here. And I think the main one is the Damian Lillard thing. They don't really know what's going out in that trade. So there's a bunch of guys who are available, even when you get beyond the Christian Wood part of this, right? You think about available free agents. Wenyen Gabriel, I know he was on your list. JaMychal Green, veteran floor spacing forward. Guys like Kelly Oubre, TJ Warren, Stanley Johnson, Terrence Ross. You think about even a guy like in the backcourt, Danny Green, Austin Rivers, Kendrick Nunn, Will Barton. Like, there's guys, John Wall, our friend Goran Dragic, right? There's a lot of guys here that are available. But again, like the Heat, they don't really know which position to address because they don't know what they're necessarily sending out in a Lillard deal. One other point on this. I know that they have 13 guys under contract. They obviously have 15 open. I think they're only going to go with 14 given how close they are and that they're probably going to be going over the second luxury tax by the time the season starts. I don't think that they're going to fill that 15th roster spot. And so that makes it even more difficult to sort of decipher what position you want to use that last spot on.
Yeah. I mean, so much of it depends on what you send out. If you have to send out Jovic, probably need somebody that's a little bit bigger body, not just Christian Wood, although he's a fine replacement, I guess, in theory, but you're probably only signing him to a 1-year deal. Like I can't imagine that they go beyond that in order to sign him. So that being the case, you're still looking for an addition, not just this season, but beyond that. If you wind up sending Kyle Lowry, do you wind up needing a point guard like Goran Dragic? I'm sure he's at the top of Miami's list over guys like John Wall and others. It's just impossible really to determine exactly what direction Miami heads. I think you want to add as much talent as possible without disrupting too much of what Miami's recipe for success was during last year's postseason, which is the good vibes, the positive, the singular focus, the support of one another, regardless of your role and your production and things of that sort. And so Wood kind of, he could really throw things off, but you have to get him to completely, fully buy in. Aside from that, I really think Dragic is probably the next step there, just because, again, you're not going to change things too much. He can handle a few minutes here and there. And he's just basically out there as a really, low support system to back up Damian Lillard and maybe even potentially Kyle Lowry.
Yeah, I would be very surprised if the Heat viewed Goran Dragic at this point as your night-to-night backup behind Damian Lillard. I think that part of
he's your third point guard on the roster.
Yeah, he's break glass in case of emergency, plays in case of injury kind of thing. Like, he's not your backup. Now, who would be your backup? That's a kind of separate question. And I guess we can. Kyle, yeah, I mean, maybe it's Kyle Lowry, maybe it's not. I'm with you. I don't think that John Wall is necessarily of interest. Kendrick Nunn is still available. I don't know if they circle that wagon again. I would be a little surprised, but again, you look at the names that are out there at point guard, it might be the best. Or maybe there's something else that they could do via trade, if depending on how big this deal gets. If there's a third or a fourth or a fifth team, even in all of these moving salaries and all these moving parts, do you go and try to make sure that Patty Mills is on his fifth team this offseason? You know what I mean? Like something like just go finding a backup point guard that is sort of salary filler, but can actually fill a need for you. I think this front office is smart enough to kind of try to get two things at once in that way. But if that were to happen, I think in a Lillard deal, obviously the Heat are going to be sending out probably more players than they get back, just by virtue of it's Tyler Hero plus a salary, and you're getting Damian Lillard back. Now, again, that can change depending if there's multiple teams involved, and maybe you do end up kind of being even when it's all said and done. But if they do end up sending out more players than they get back, which is probably the expectation right now, then all of a sudden you open up a couple of different avenues. And I think any of those guys that I listed, and obviously there's more out there, could be options. But we already talked about Kyle Lowry. It gets to our third burning question here.
Wait, sorry, before we move on, which players? I mean, again, so many questions about who's left on the roster, but is there any players that you think stand out in terms of, is it Harry Giles? Is it JaMychal Green? I can't think of anybody else off the top of my head that really stands out. I know, again, not in terms of like an immediate fit, because we don't know what the final roster is going to be. But if you could add any of those, are there any names there that are of particular interest that you think have potential?
I would kick the tires on Danny Green and see what he has left. You know who I really like also is I like Terrence Davis. I'm not really sure why he's got unsigned. He got some playoff minutes and he wasn't awful. Like defensively, he's not great, but if you're going to lose Tyler Hero and you need some bench scoring, like just a guard who can go get you a bucket, I like Terrence Davis. I know maybe most listeners probably don't even know who Terrence Davis is. He was a backup on the Sacramento Kings last year, but I like him. Kelly Oubre's out there. You know, I've always had an affinity for him. I think he can make sense as sort of a switchable wing. And there's TJ Warren. Like those are the sort of guys that if you're adding Damian Lillard, you're kind of in the Phoenix Suns way of things where it's just like, okay, let's go get veterans on the minimum who might be a little washed up, but we're willing to take a chance on them. So yeah, those are the guys, and the guy that you were always high on, Wendy and Gabriel. I like him too. So I don't know any of those guys.
Stanley Johnson finally making up for that draft there debacle. They could have brought him in. I know he was high on their list, and he was picked a couple spots ahead of Justice Winslow. But
yeah, there's
guys. I don't. There's names, right? There's always. I mean, I hate to. It sounds dehumanizing, but there's always players out there that are really looking for an opportunity, not just like extreme cases like Giles or Dion Waiters and stuff like that, but just players that were active last year and they were on rosters. I mean, JaMychal Green was a starter for the Warriors at times. You know, it's just surprising that he just hasn't gotten a call at all from anybody. Or maybe he's
like one of those things where it's like he keeps going from team to team to team, and then he ends up on the Warriors, and then they kind of don't trust him anymore. And you're like, all right, well, if it didn't work in the Warriors, like, where's it going to work? It's kind of like being on Miami and then kind of not panning out. It's like, oh, if it didn't work there, where is it going to work? I don't know.
Is it like with the Warriors? I mean, you cover the team. Like, I get what you're saying, but with the Warriors, isn't it more like this? The Warriors do what they do so well, and the guys that do it, it's not just like a cultural ethos thing. It's like you play with our system and play alongside Steph.
Yeah, but it's like, so I think there are people that would also be like, well, it didn't work in Miami because you didn't fit their culture, but you would fit our culture. You know what I mean? I'm just saying, like, in terms of successful organizations, if it doesn't pan out with one of them, your stock just tends to take a hit. I don't know. And he's older anyway. And he's played for almost every team in the NBA, it feels like. Will Kyle Lowry be on the team next season? We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Heat. Thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure that you're subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. It's time for our third burning question. Will Kyle Lowry be on the team next season? Just for reference, David, if, hypothetically, Damian Lillard were on the team as well as Kyle Lowry, those guys would be combined making $75 million. That's a lot of money. I don't know that would keep the Heat from doing it. I actually do know. That will not keep the Heat from doing a Damian Lillard deal. If Portland decides that they want Duncan Robinson instead of Kyle Lowry or something like that, they would just get it done. And I think at that point, they could just try to trade Kyle Lowry by the trade deadline. An expiring contract of $29 million has value, as we've seen in the past, in terms of like, okay, this team, their season hasn't gone as expected, and maybe they're going to try to go in the tank, get off some long-term contracts, take Kyle Lowry's expiring. It's done in 2 months, and then boom, you move on. I think that they could do that, and also that would solve Miami's backup point guard issue if it were Kyle Lowry.
Yeah, I think he stays on the roster, and I think he stays for the whole year, assuming, again, the Dame Lillard deal gets done. I think he's not a starter at this point, and I think he's embraced that change in his career. But we still saw him, even with the change in rules and stuff like that regarding the flopping, I still think he'll be active and productive. And I think the team just really values what he does and who he is as a championship level player, willing to do whatever's necessary in order to win. He might not be very talented at this point, or he might not be very productive at this point. And here's to hoping that he's healthy for the first time in a long time. And he's able to produce to a higher level, more along the lines of what they expected when they signed him a couple seasons ago. But I still think he has value in that front office, and I think they value him, again, as a person, as a player. And I think regardless of the amount of money that you're paying to two older guards, you take them right now for what Kyle provides. And you kick the tires around the trade deadline if you can make a significant improvement, and depending on where they are in terms of the record and how much potential they actually have as contenders and title contenders. But I think he stays with the team. I think they want to see this play out with Kyle there in the playoffs, in a playoff situation, knowing that he can play at a higher level.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely a chance. I wouldn't say that if you get Dame, Kyle Lowry is gone. I don't think Robinson, smaller, longer term, like smaller per year, longer term, younger player. Maybe you see some value in having Duncan Robinson where you don't really see value in adding Kyle Lowry. If you're the Trailblazers, it would ultimately be up to them. If Lowry is on the roster next year, I think that they could look to redistribute that money at the deadline in terms of, okay, we can add maybe two players to our rotation as opposed to just having it all in one Kyle Lowry. But I'm with you too. I don't think that they would be like eager. I don't think that they would necessarily try to attach a real asset to him to get off of him. I think they'd be very happy with having him as their backup point guard. And by the way, that contract expires at the end of the year. It could expire, and then you can re-sign him at something that's not $29 million a year, something closer to like maybe mid-level money that he's probably going to be making on his next contract anyway, if he decides to still be in the NBA because he is getting older. So I think that there's a chance Kyle Lowry is on the team, and we've basically laid out the reasons why.
You think it's slighter? You think it's slighter than I do? I at least that's what I'm inferring.
I just think it's up to. I think it's up to Portland. Yeah, I don't think that Miami feels that they need to dictate which salary Portland takes between Lowry and Duncan Robinson. I think they just want this Lillard deal to get done. So I just think it's up to Portland at that point.
Fair enough.
Next burning question. What about Miami's two-way contracts right now? They've got 2 of them filled. They have 3 of them available this year. That's one more than it's been in the past few years under the new CBA. The 2 that they have filled are Drew Smith and Jamari Bouye. The other guy is Jamal Cain, that we should mention right off the top because he was obviously on that 2-way contract to finish last year. Restricted free agent now. No teams have made an offer sheet to him. He's a little bit in limbo. Again, one of these guys closer to Miami, obviously, but one of these guys sort of waiting for this Damian Lillard thing to get resolved. He wants a standard contract. He wants to be part of the 15-man roster. I don't know that that's going to be there. I suspect it might be, but I don't know that it will be. It depends on, again, does Miami feel like it needs to add a wing to the end of the roster? Do they feel like they need guards? Do they need a big man? Whatever. So we'll see. The thing that I'm intrigued by is I actually think that there's 2 spots up for grabs. Yeah. Because you've been really good on this, David. Drew Smith, he didn't have the juice in Summer League. And I think Jamari Bouye is I hesitate to say safe because nobody's safe on these 2-way contracts.
Oh,
by the way, you could swap them in and out, and it's no effect of the luxury tax, the aprons, the cap, nothing. You can just swap them in and out as you please. But right now, I think Bouye is the safest out of this group. And Drew Smith, I think, is playing for one of these 2-way contracts at this point. Even though he holds it right now, I think he's playing for one in training camp.
Yeah, no, I would agree there. I don't see Smith being able to hang on to that. If you've got Bouye already as a guard on a 2-way deal, I wouldn't be surprised that they give it to Jamal Cain either. And then look, you're probably going to be shipping out Duncan, and if that's the case, then you might need somebody who can provide some shooting. Is Drew Peterson an option there? I mean, I think he's earned it. So. I think he showed enough over Summer League there. He'll get that opportunity. And look, 2-way deals, we keep thinking of this farm system that Miami's got with the Summer League. It's open to everybody. All those guys are looking for a deal. If they played for Detroit, if they played for Portland, if they played for anybody, and Miami sees enough or scouted them enough before the draft and says, you know what, this guy's suddenly available, they'll take a chance on him and offer him a deal there. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that route either.
One weird wrinkle here, if Miami doesn't fill out at least 14 guys, again, 13 guys under contract right now, they need to have a minimum of 14 before they could start offering Exhibit 10 deals, which are basically training camp invites. That's the official lingo for that. They can't do it until they have 14 guys under contract. So they kind of have to fill out something. They need to add a player at some point to that 14th roster spot before training camp. So when we're talking about like Damian Lillard deadlines even, you can add a 14th player without the Damian Lillard thing being resolved, but it does make things a little bit more complicated. But you kind of have until training camp to make that decision because the Heat are not going to go into training camp without you're able to have like up to 21 players now for your training camp roster. They don't have enough guys right now. They only have 13 guys right now. So we'll see. 15 guys if you include Drew Smith and Jamari Bouye. Final burning question. Is there any hope that Tyler Hero can return and be happy next year if he's not included in the Damian Lillard trade?
Absolutely not. No chance at all. I think he'll be a professional about it. I think he'll do whatever he has to do, but I wouldn't be so. He's going to get paid, and you know what he can do. And I'm sure from the player's perspective, like everybody in that locker room is going to be like, look, man, I've been there. My name's been in trade talks before. I've been traded before. You get used to it. Shake it off. Look, we need you to get your head out of your ass and just focus on you doing the best job that you can do now as part of this team. But I think that bridge has been burned a little bit. Like there can't be any trust between Hero and the organization. As much as they've talked him up, and that's a big component of what Pat Riley was doing at the end of the preseason conference, not gassing him up as a lot of people have suggested, but I think publicly saying, look, we have faith in who he is as a player, because I think they actually do. They believe in who Tyler Hero is, despite the general consensus around the league that he's washed and terrible.
I think he's better than Tyrese Maxey.
Yeah. So many different, ways of viewing what Hero does, but I think he's appreciated in the locker room. He's appreciated in the front office. And I think he still has to feel like he cannot trust that organization, because it's been 3 consistent seasons now of being perpetually linked to trade talks.
It would suck. It would be awkward. And I'm bummed out for Tyler Hero, because he's a good player and he's been dragged through this, not just by his own franchise, where it's like every summer, man, it's another trade rumor that I'm involved in. Like you get sick of it as a player, and I get it. And you could tell, well, he's making $25 million. Whatever, man. It's all relative. Like that can't be good. And now it has the feeling of being so real. I do think that the Heat really like him. I think objectively you could understand, okay, I'm Tyler Hero. I feel like I'm good. I know that the organization trusts me and believes in me, but it's also Damian Lillard, and I get it. But that's a very objective, like that doesn't happen. Like no person thinks that way. Like that's crazy. So you have to be like the most stoic of stoics to kind of feel that way, right? So it bums me out. I wouldn't rule it out. There would just be a lot of work that has to get put into rebuilding that trust, and
it's impossible
to do that, man. Like, what are you going to do? Not like just keep him out of trade rumors forever? Because at some point he's just going to be like, you know what? Get me out of here.
We chase superstars here in South Florida, right? That's the whole thing. I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily the best route to do with it. Exactly. It'll be something. Is it Joel Embiid? Does he get shipped to Philadelphia? When Embiid asks out eventually, who knows? Like, that's the whole thing. It's like, the view then is, and he has to understand it, is like, I'm viewed as an appreciated player. They like what I do, but I'm not a superstar, because if not, they would quit hunting for the next superstar, because they think that I already am that guy. They're not putting Bam's name out there. Like, he just turned 26. He's not including those trade talks. They view him differently in that front office, and that has to be hurtful. Like, yes, he can accept it. He did last year. He was very good last season, despite the fact that he was linked to Kevin Durant and Donovan Mitchell and whoever else. And yet he was able to handle himself professionally. Unfortunately, I think between the injury, between what happened, that Miami was able to advance all the way to the NBA Finals without him. Like, how do you view yourself as being integral to the team's success when they were more successful without you in the lineup? That's
and I mentioned it, and because of all that, he's been dragged. I mentioned before, and I meant to get to it, but like getting dragged not just by, it feels like, his own organization through these trade rumors, but being dragged reputationally through trade talks nationally. Like, people just like dismissing him as a trade asset. I mean, like, if Tyler Hero were 6'8", this trade would be done. He doesn't play a position of need for Portland. And that's the basketball reason why this trade isn't done, right? It has nothing to do with his talent level, just base talent level and value across the league. And yet he's being treated as like this nothing thing, this nothing asset, this non-asset, almost a negative asset, where I've written this, I've said it, David. Whatever team gets Tyler Hero for a first rounder, or even like 2 first-round picks,
they're going to be surprised. Yeah,
they're getting a steal. And I would be lining up as a team that could steal Tyler Hero for something like that. But
we're just gassing him up.
Just people in Miami, we're just mouthpieces, I guess. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Tomorrow we are going to be talking about the biggest stars in Miami sports. Where does Lionel Messi rank?
Maybe
in all of this. You can tune in, hit that subscribe button on YouTube, follow us on your favorite podcast app. David, thanks for joining me.
You got it, Wes.